Hello and welcome into the show. My name is Joey Browning. I want to thank you all for being here on whatever platform it is you're using to join our show. It is January 2nd, 2026. This is our official reaction show to the 3 college football playoff quarterfinals held on New Year's Day. This is also our first transfer portal reporting show. It's today, January 2nd, as I mentioned earlier, is the first official day that college football players can put their name into the portal. We're going to give you the latest we're hearing on where some players might be going, where they're visiting, who's in the lead for some of the bigger names. Guys, before we get into any of that, I want to remind y'all to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button on YouTube, on our show channel. Also, give us comments there. Subscribe anywhere where it is that you get your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or somewhere else. Remember, we are available in podcast form. This same show, this same audio you're hearing now, you can get it anywhere that you get your podcast and the Joey Browning College Football Show. Also, guys, follow us on Twitter and follow us on TikTok, both at Joey Browning CFP. We've got a lot of content on both of those pages, and we want to engage with our fans anywhere that we can, and that includes social media. So, guys, to the games, right? This is a podcast. This is a show dedicated to the games, the X's and O's, the results, the outcome, right? Yesterday, a couple of, I think, maybe expected outcomes in games, and then probably one that prognosticators, analysts, people that set betting lines probably didn't expect, right? So we're going to get into all that stuff tonight. Guys, New Year's Day, just, what a day, right? As a college football fan, it's one of those things that, growing up, it seems like there's only one thing to do on New Year's Day, and that's to sit down on the couch in front of your TV all day long and, take into the pageantry and traditions of New Year's Day. Now, we know this day and age, college football, a lot of that stuff is taking a back seat to, the big money and the big ideas of the powers that be, but still something special about that 4 to 5 o'clock Eastern time zone window of the Rose Bowl coming on and all the sights and sounds of that. And even New Year's night, like the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, just, there's a lot of, stuff that really comes with that in terms of the pageantry, the traditions of New Year's Day they're very special. And so it's not lost on us as college football fans. Also, too, it's also not lost on us here at our show as to the role that the big bowl games are playing in the college football playoff right now, in terms of the quarterfinals being held there, the semifinals being held at these bowl sites. As we get into the offseason and the games are over with, we're going to cover that content and that type of content more and more in terms of, like, how can the college football playoff be bettered? How can the sport be bettered? And specifically in this instance, the quarterfinals should be held on campus, okay? The bigger bowls like the Sugar, the Rose, Fiesta, they should probably be on some type of rotating schedule that hosts the semifinals. And then the championship game, whatever, they can bid it out just like they do now. It's kind of like the Super Bowl and in the Final Four and host it wherever, in whatever big city and a big venue they want to. But Georgia, Indiana, Texas Tech, Ohio State, they deserve to have home football games the last couple of days. And second year in a row that they're not getting those. And guys, the atmosphere at the Sugar Bowl last night was awesome. It was great. You could tell, sitting at home on the couch, watching on TV, the atmosphere was unbelievable. The Rose Bowl was great. All the same sensory things, the sights, the sounds. It was great to take in. But then you turn on something like the Orange Bowl, the noon kickoff, and it's not to blame Oregon and Texas Tech. They're the ones that are forced to be playing there. But this stagnant, very sterilized, pro football stadium atmosphere for a day that's supposed to be college football's day. it just doesn't sit right. And I really do believe that the more and more this playoff and talks about the new playoff and the expanded playoff, the SEC and the Big Ten, they're the big players. So much talk about that, kind of has centered around numbers of teams and automatic bids. But I believe an even more kind of time sensitive part of this is going to be going forward. What role does home sites play in this? Because it makes no sense for the teams that get the buys not to also get a home playoff game. I mean, can you imagine Sanford Stadium or, the Horseshoe on the banks of the old Antangee in Columbus getting a home playoff game in those atmospheres? Can you imagine Miami having to go to Columbus, Ohio on New Year's Eve and play a football game? Or Alabama going to Bloomington, Indiana, right, on New Year's Day to play a football game? Like, those things, whether the dates, whether they have it on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, you know, the bowls probably still have their place in the pecking order when it comes to those dates, but they need to be the semifinals at the soonest, right? Not the quarters. So I know that's a calendar issue, that's a logistical issue, but I do believe that once college football and the powers that be realize that the bowls don't really factor in like they used to as power players in this whole thing. They're much more of a TV product now, and they can still serve a place in this whole thing, but it doesn't need to be at the expense of these top four teams, inconveniencing them to have to travel and play at a neutral site, and when the teams they're playing just more than likely hosted their own home playoff game before getting to the quarters. So, like I said, we'll cover stuff like that much more in the off season on this show. But that yesterday just kind of reminded me of all that. But I love the traditions of college football and things like the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl. But I do believe that they should not be hosting the quarterfinals. They should be hosting the semifinals at the earliest. So to the games. We're going to talk about these games tonight a little bit out of order. We're going to talk about them in the order that I can recall them and remember them at the best. So, and that's obviously going to be the most entertaining game, the most off-the-wall game, and that is, of course, the Sugar Bowl from last night in New Orleans between Georgia and Ole Miss. Ole Miss, headlining this game, just outlasts Georgia and outplays Georgia, honestly. Looking at this game, I thought going in, as we kind of saw on our Sugar Bowl preview show, that this was ultimately going to be a battle that from the first game in October when these two teams played, I thought that the way Georgia's defense had surged late in the season, and obviously Ole Miss's strength was their offense, this was going to be a battle between those two units, Georgia's defense and Ole Miss's offense. And it was a chess match. It was a back and forth, and it did not disappoint in my opinion. I thought the battle in between these two units, and then obviously I thought Georgia's offense and Ole Miss's defense, obviously played a big role in this game. Ole Miss's defense surprisingly showed up. You say they gave up 34 points and they won the game 39-34. Their defense really played that big role, but honestly, if you watched it, you know that they did. But I wasn't sure that Ole Miss was capable of this. I think that's my first takeaway, is that you look at everything this team has been through in the last month, the whole Lane Kiffin saga, the 6 offensive coaches who left for LSU and have come back to coach through the playoffs. You look at Pete Golding being immediately named, not interim, but permanent head coach the day that Kiffin leaves. In his second game as a football coach, as a head coach, he's coaching against Kirby Smart, who's considered the premier coach in the game at this moment. And all of that I just did not know, with all that chaos and everything surrounded them, this entire hurricane of outside noise, and honestly inside noise too, would Ole Miss be able to rally and give an effort that it would take to win this game, to beat Georgia, who came into this game with one loss all year by field goal. And they did. They passed the test with flying colors. I cannot say enough about Pete Golden and how he prepared this team for this game. It was not perfect. Of course, there were mistakes. It's a football game. There's going to be mistakes. There was going to be wrong buttons pushed by coaches. There's going to be, instances where coulda, woulda, shoulda. But for the most part, and for when it mattered, Ole Miss answered the bell every single time in this game. And ultimately, they outplayed Georgia. And that's something that, in my opinion, I just did not see coming. I didn't see that Ole Miss had the firepower to overcome a Georgia team that honestly was probably in the conversation for the 2 or 3 teams in this bracket that had the best chance to win it all. And Ole Miss, I think was considered probably not a speed bump, but a minor challenge for Georgia on the way to the semifinals. And, Ole Miss came into this game. We talked about on our show, schematically, could Ole Miss run the football? Could Kawan Lacey, who I thought was one of the better running backs in the country, even though he didn't have a huge game against Georgia the first time around, was he healthy enough with that shoulder? Could he give them enough? And I said this, they're not going to run for 200 or 300 yards in this game, but can they match Georgia up front to where they can run the football consistently and stay in manageable situations on second and third down, and like I said, not dominate on the ground, but have a consistent run game? And they obviously did. I mean, Lacey had 22 carries for 98 yards, and Ole Miss held their own, and they got in those second and third and manageables. And when they did, the timing and the ability to get the ball out fast was there for Ole Miss. They converted on those third downs a lot and kept Georgia off the field, all right, when they needed to. Now, Georgia got stops, okay? Georgia got plenty of stops in this game. We're going to talk about that when we get to the Georgia side of this conversation. But I don't want to short Ole Miss and just talking about how much of a statement win this was for their program. Pete Golden, he has as many college football playoff wins as any SEC coach, not named Nick Saban or Kirby Smart. Think about that. The guy's coached for 2 games. Now, I know one of them against Tulane, say what you will, but he beat Georgia in the second one. And you can't give them enough credit to think about what it would have been like those 6 coaches who are in Baton Rouge pretty much every other day, flying back and forth to prep this team, but also be in staff meetings and be in the building in Baton Rouge. I mean, heck, Lane Kiffin tweeted out the early morning picture a couple of days before the Sugar Bowl, with all those guys in there. And, they probably had an early morning staff meeting this morning at LSU with the transfer portal opening. I can't imagine the turmoil and the back and forth that would cause, and I just assumed that there would be some type of lack of, not focus, but a lack of reaching Ole Miss's full potential just because of those circumstances that were out of anyone's control, that it just is what it is, right? That there's no way that Charlie Weiss Jr. can be on the same page with his offense and his quarterback in this game when he's got both feet out the door to go work at LSU next year. And same thing for all the other offensive coaches that are in that same predicament for Ole Miss. But hats off to them. I mean, they came up with a great plan. And just kind of getting into the game, like I mentioned, if you had told me going in that, Ole Miss was going to run the ball for 4.1 yards a carry against Georgia, They're going to run it 27 times. I would have thought that would have been a win for Ole Miss. That would be something that they could hang their hat on. Now, on the flip side, I would have said, well, what did Georgia run for? What was their yards per carry, yards per rush? And if you told me Georgia's yards per rush was 3.4 on 124 yards on 37 carries, I would have said that probably equals a victory for Ole Miss, because Georgia, if there's one thing that the statistical profile of these two teams going into this game was, Georgia is going to be able to run the football at will and impose their will. And the only question was, can Ole Miss somehow get them behind the sticks, get them off the field, get them to turn it over, get them to make some type of mistake that keeps them from scoring 7, right? Give them 3 if they can get 3, but don't give them 7. But Ole Miss's defense was game for this. Georgia came out. The first 2 drives, I really thought Georgia was kind of playing with their food a little bit. They had one handoff to Nate Frazier, one running back carry on the first 2 drives, and they fizzled out, both of them. And then the third drive, Georgia just heck with it, power, counter, split zone, and they ran for 67 yards on the third drive, and really made the statement. And that was when I kind of looked up and was like, this is Georgia football right here. They're going to take this game over. They're going to dominate the line of scrimmage, and this game, they're going to go on and win this game by a couple scores. And to Ole Miss's credit, that was really the only time all night that Georgia did that, right? They made adjustments. They had guys that played big. I thought, 52, Eccles, I thought he had an awesome game. They were stunting him around and getting him in passing lanes and getting it where he could knock the football down, and he had a couple breakups. I thought he was great in this football game. I thought Xavier Harris, the big D tackle, 51, he had an unbelievable game. He was eating up space in there and resetting the line of scrimmage. And like really in that third quarter, I think with Georgia with the 9-point lead coming out, it looked like they said, hey, we're going to come out and run the football, and they really couldn't get anything consistent going, at least in that third quarter. And I think that changed the game a good bit. I think Georgia expected at that point in time to be able to run the football and control the game, and they really couldn't. I thought the way the game went, I thought Georgia looked a little flat coming out on both sides of the ball. Ole Miss got the 2 field goals and got the 6-point lead, and then once Georgia had that third drive and kind of settled in, even after giving the touchdown to Ole Miss on the next drive, Georgia went right down. Stockton has the amazing play where he breaks the pocket, rolls left, gets destroyed, gets it to Cash Jones. Quarterback sneaks it in the next play. And, at that point, it's like, Georgia's they're kind of getting cranked up here. They were flat to begin with, and then obviously the scoop and score. When that happens, that's you think not ball game, but that's definitely that doesn't spell good omens for Ole Miss. Now to that point, I thought Georgia had a chance a couple of times in the third quarter to put its foot on Ole Miss's throat and end the game. You had the ball coming out of the half. You went 3 and out. You had the ball. You were able to get a stop on Ole Miss's first possession in the second half, and you got the ball back and went down. And I really thought they wasted the second possession with they had a couple of good plays there to get it inside the 40, and then the drive just kind of fizzled out. Woodring misses the field goal, and at that point, your defense had been playing pretty well, right? You had a defensive touchdown. You held Ole Miss to 2 long field goals, and they had 1 touchdown drive. And you're halfway through the third quarter. And it just goes to show when you can put a team away, when you can pull away a little bit, you have to do it in these situations, right? In these high leverage games like this. Because when you have people like on Ole Miss's offense, like 6, like 5, like 1, like 2, it's only a matter of time before those guys are going to get going. And Georgia's defense, I think they got a little tired last night. And obviously, uh, there was some attrition. Ja'Cory Thomas getting thrown out with the targeting call in the first half. KJ Bolden goes out early fourth quarter. CJ Allen was a little banged up. Um, just had constant turnover. Raylan Wilson was out of the game for a little while. And you already were missing Gabe Harris, and I think that sort of started to catch up. And Ole Miss caught fire. Now, for the whole game long, Georgia could not get a pass rush. I think they really missed Gabe Harris. I thought that was something late in the year he had kind of been key with. And Georgia, I said enough on the show the other night, Georgia had been rolling guys, and I really thought that they would still be able to get pressure, and they just couldn't. And, you could tell the game plan for Ole Miss was a lot like the first one. Get the ball out of his hand, let Shamlis throw it on time, and that was what they did. But what I came away the most impressed with Ole Miss's offense was when Georgia said enough of the quick game. We're gonna walk up in your face. We're gonna play press, and we're gonna make you throw the ball down the field to beat us. That's when Ole Miss exploded. They hit back shoulder stuff most of the night to Stripling, and to Wallace as well. And I thought they ran. That was when they started. They ran the football, and Lacey was getting enough, 4, 5, 6 yards a clip that they could be in these manageable situations, and they didn't have to take a bunch of chances. Now, obviously the real drive there at the beginning of the fourth quarter, Georgia has them in, 3rd and 11, and he makes the ridiculous, the couple of ridiculous plays there. The one where he flips it to Lacey, behind, like to the side, just as he's going down. And then the other one where he runs clear across the field, Everett and Johnson are in pursuit, and then he wheels back, and he finds Lacey on the sideline. The big collision with Bolden there. C.J. Allen finally made the tackle, but I thought that was Georgia's defense I thought they were really gassed at that point. And then you had the big play to Wallace after that, when the pocket broke. And that was the thing about Shamlis was he really didn't hurt Georgia running the football rushing yards wise, but he hurt Georgia a lot when he broke the pocket and kept his eyes downfield, because that man coverage that Georgia tried to play a good bit of, those receivers separated and got open for him, and that was a big part of the game. And then at that point, they really started to hurt Georgia, like I said, on the back shoulder stuff. The touchdown to Wallace right after Georgia's failed 4th and 2 play there, the back shoulder to Wallace. They RPO'd it, and probably should have handed it off, but he was feeling it, and he ripped the back shoulder to Wallace against man coverage. And perfect. That was the thing I came with. Ole Miss made the plays. I thought for the most of the time, Ellis Robinson, Dalen Everett, they were in good position. I thought DeMello Jones struggled a little bit, and obviously, he had the big one there at the end with Stribling, on the 3rd and 5 with, 36 seconds left, and gave up the 40-yard pass that set the winning field goal up. I thought he kind of struggled, but I thought for the most part, Georgia's secondary covered really well. They couldn't get to Shamlis. They couldn't affect him, and ultimately, I think that's why they lost the football game, because they couldn't get to him, and it allowed him to get the ball out. It allowed those playmakers to make plays, and they hurt Georgia in the first game, but I thought, as the game went on, they just seemed to get better in making those big plays, and it just goes to show you once again, Georgia, there in the third quarter, you have a couple of chances to make it 24-12 or 28-12, and they couldn't do it. and offensively they kind of played with their food a little bit in those situations. And, you know, I thought that, it seemed like uh, Georgia never really could just get any type of quick game going. There were a lot of third and medium situations where it looked like they wanted to go to Zach Branch or try to work one of the tight ends, and they just, there was a lot of batted balls in this game. And I thought that Stockton, it didn't seem like he saw it really well at times. There were a couple times where he immediately pulled the ball down and looked to run it in a couple situations. And, you know, I give Georgia a lot of credit there in the fourth quarter. When you're down by 10 in that spot, that that building's roaring. There's Ole Miss fans everywhere, and they went tempo and came right down the field. And 14's making throw after throw. Branch is making plays. Frazier's running the ball hard, getting 10 or 12 a pop. And I thought that they give them a lot of credit for coming back, getting the ball back, forcing a 3 and out there. I know the no call on the face mask was obviously a big part of that, but they got the ball back and then, kind of methodically worked their way down the field, got a couple penalties there. Obviously, the sequence that everybody wants to talk about is, the goal to go down there with around a minute left. And what do you do? And, guys, in that scenario, as from a coaching perspective, you can only do so much, okay? And there's only so much time to make these decisions. Now, I know people are going to say, that's what the money's for. That's what the Kirby Smart gets paid the big bucks to do. But ultimately, after that second down play where Georgia hands off to McCray, and I thought Ole Miss did an excellent job on that play of stunting. I think they had a pinch on. They had pressure, a guy off the edge. And it really looked to me like, I think if Gunner pulls that, he might walk in the end zone. I don't know on that if he had a pull read necessarily. That's something we'll go back and look at the film. Going to kind of check out and see. But that play kind of changed things because you went from a 3.5 yard line to the 6, and now it's 3rd and goal. And you're sitting there with the predicament of Ole Miss has no timeouts left. If you run a play and keep it on the ground, you probably can run it down to about 15 seconds, kick the field goal if you don't score, and tie the game and pretty much leave them no time. Or you might think you have a better high percentage chance of getting it and scoring the touchdown if you throw it. And ultimately, that's what Kirby said in his postgame, is he was trying to win the game. He thought they had a play to win the game right there. And as a coach, I think you can sit here and criticize him after the fact all you want, but that's he's explaining his process of decision making right there. So it's kind of hard to throw a bunch of criticism his way. You can say it was the wrong decision, I guess, but had they scored right there, you probably wouldn't. If yeah, I guess you can criticize the play call itself, trying to get it to Oscar Delp instead of Branch, but I think that he explained his process of decision making, that he's trying to win the football game right then, and if they thought they had a better chance with that pass play than they did a run they liked there, then there you go. That's all you need to know. Now, if Georgia runs it there, probably kick the field goal, probably tie it up with no time left, and you see what happens in overtime. But either way, enough time was left, and I really thought that, like I said, that Shamlis, he got so hot there in the fourth quarter, and it became one of those scenarios where I don't know that Georgia could afford to just let Ole Miss have the ball back, knowing that time was slipping away. And, I think that was the reasoning behind the 4th and 2 call when it was 27-24. I think back to some situations like at the 2015 national championship game, Alabama and Clemson, when Nick Saban was very much in his post game was pretty honest about he knew that they couldn't stop Deshaun Watson. He knew that they just didn't have an answer, and that's what led to the decision of the onside kick after Alabama scored there late in the game. They go for the surprise onside and get it because you know he thought even if it's a shot in the dark, if there's a chance they could keep the football away from them, away from Watson, and keep the ball out of his hands, then that's all you can do to help your defense because your defense is not going to stop them. And I thought Kirby's decision to go for it on fourth down there, uh, it is what it is. Georgia's done that a bunch this year, and they've had some success with it, and it's helped them win some games. Now, I believe if you do that in that type of high leverage scenario, everybody's got to be on the same page. And obviously they weren't. Monroe Freeland at left tackle, very clear from replay and stuff that he didn't expect the ball to be snapped because he was supposed to block Perkins, number 4, off the edge, and he didn't even look at him. And that's the guy that made the play. And ultimately that's a huge spot in the game. I don't have a problem with the call itself. I have a problem with the execution. And so, if you're gonna make those types of calls in those situations, you better execute. I mean, it's as simple as that. I thought, like I said, some guys that really stood out in this game for me for Ole Miss. Obviously, Trinidad Chambliss just, I mean, he just completely took the game over there in the fourth quarter, and Georgia didn't have an answer. With his accuracy and his decision making, his ability to get the ball out quick and not allow them to get any type of pass rush. And I thought Stripling, number 1. I mean, he is a guy that stood out in the first game for me as just. I mean, you just didn't want the ball in his hands in open space because he can go. And, I mean, he showed that tonight, and he made the big play there at the end of the game. Like, I mean, it's hard to ask a DB to cover those guys all night long without any type of pass rush. It just really is. I thought Wallace is another guy that, he just continued to make plays as the game went on as well. Kewan Lacey is exactly what, I kind of thought the peak of Ole Miss's game coming in would be if Lacey could give them something like he gave them. And he's just so long and hard to tackle and he's just hard to get a hold of and hard to get on the ground. And he really, I mean, if you think back this year, nobody has run the ball like that against Georgia. I mean, nobody. And, that was something that he, I mean, obviously he played a key role in, and, their other backs didn't play very much of a factor in the game. And, I thought he might have been, him and Chambliss might have been the best 2 players on the field. And that's, that's a big statement to make. But, I mean, if you go back and watch the game, like, it's hard to argue that they're not with the way they affected the game. From a Georgia standpoint, like I said, I thought that Nate Frazier, he really got it going. I mean, when they were throwing him the ball in the first half, and even the second half, his running ability, like in the way he was, I mean, he really came on in the second half of the season, and he might be someone that probably could have touched the ball some more because he gave it a spark. Now, obviously, him going down there in the fourth quarter, that really hurt Georgia, I think, down there in that goal-to-go situation at the end. Not having that guy that had been able to do it on that because nobody else really could. Like, I mean, you look at Bowens and look at what he was able to run for Georgia. I mean, he goes 15 for 86, 5.7 yards a carry. Nobody else averaged more than 2 yards a carry. Cash Jones had 2 carries for 11, so he averaged 5.5 on 2 carries, right? I mean, Bowens was 5 for 10. McCray was 2 for -3. Gunner had some effective runs, but from a running back standpoint, for whatever reason, Frazier was really the only guy that was effective for Georgia. And when he got hurt there at the end, I thought it really hurt him. Because I think he would have been an X factor in them trying to score a touchdown there at the end. And so, it's like I said, I think for Georgia, you can hang your head and lick your wounds today. It sucks that they're not in there from a Georgia standpoint. But I think also, in this day and age in college football, you just got to look like when you get to this point in the season, guys, it's not 2016 anymore. It's not 2020 anymore. It's not 2022 anymore. You don't have these teams like Georgia or Alabama that have stockpiled this talent so much that they're going to walk into a national quarterfinal game and just walk all over another team. They're just not going to. The talent is so evenly distributed now that it's not going to happen. You're going to be in these tight games. I mean, I almost hesitate to say it. It's almost like an NFL setting in terms of parity when you get to this point. If you can imagine this being like the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, like you're not going to beat somebody, 34-7 like Georgia beat Michigan in the Orange Bowl in 21. You're not going to beat Michigan State 38-0 in the national semifinal like Alabama did in 2015. That's not going to happen because the talent is too evenly distributed across the landscape of college football. And Ole Miss has as many playmakers and many game effectors as Georgia does. Now, you could say that Georgia might have a little bit more depth, but Georgia's backups are not as good as some of Ole Miss's starters like they were 5 years ago. It's just not the case. And I think you can make the case in this game that Ole Miss's defensive line beat Georgia's offensive line. And on the other side, okay, I think that Ole Miss's offensive line opened up holes and protected better than anybody has all year against this Georgia front. And that just goes to show how this game has changed, right? And I say all that to say, if you're a Georgia fan, 12-2, SEC championship, the year that you had, like, you can look at this as a missed opportunity, I guess. But I think you also have to kind of, chalk it up to this day and age of college football. You're going to get in these shootouts where you're going to run out of time sometimes. It's going to happen. Georgia drew a hot hand in Ole Miss. And I think, if you're sitting there thinking, hey, what if Georgia had gotten the 5 seed and not made the SEC championship game and gotten to play Texas Tech today? Hey, they might be moving on to the semis, but this is the hand that you dealt, and you got to play it. And sometimes these are coin flip. These are going to be coin flip games going forward. They just are. And the fact that Georgia is where they are and have made or on the type of run as a program that they're on in the last 5 seasons is, it's remarkable. And I think if you're a Georgia fan and you sit back and look at that, kind of appreciate it. No, you're not winning the national championship this year, but heck, man, you're there every single year and you're in it. And in this day and age of college football, I don't know how much more you can ask for because I guess what I'm trying to say is there's not going to be dominance. There's not going to be, you're not going to walk your way to the national championship. You're going to have to win in some of these high leverage scenarios where talent's kind of equal. And Georgia just didn't win tonight or last night, I'm sorry. And it's just how it is. And it's not like they gave the game away. They made mistakes. There were coaching calls that are questioned. There always will be. But they got beat. Ole Miss made plays with really good football players, and they beat them. And you're going to get beat sometimes in this day and age of college football, no matter how good you are. You're going to lose some of these high leverage games. You're not going to win them all. There's a reason that Nick Saban got out of this, okay? He knows that, and I'm just using Saban as an example because his run is the greatest college football has ever seen. That wasn't going to happen anymore. And I know that he probably saw that. And I'm sure that was a factor in him hanging it up, because you're not going to go out there and dominate these playoff games and you know, win these snooze fest national championship games anymore. That's not going to happen. And so, if Ole Miss obviously thrilled, probably the biggest win in the program's history. I, I think they got a chance to win it all. I mean, with 6 back there, if 5 stays healthy, 1 and 2 running routes and catching the ball, if that offensive line can protect anything like that going forward, I mean, you got a puncher's chance against anybody, better than a puncher's chance. And so, and I think we're going to break this game down a lot more on film next week, and I'm excited to look at that. But just kind of the first reaction to the game was, I really thought it was a really good football game, an entertaining game, sort of a circus game. Um, and, I don't necessarily think that, Georgia should be, Monday morning quarterback to death in this, so much, other than just the credit goes to Ole Miss. They won the game. Georgia did not lose it. So, enough on that one, though. We'll go ahead and get on to the next game in our rundown here, and we'll go ahead and talk about the Orange Bowl and Texas Tech and Oregon. I'm sorry, I almost said Ole Miss again. And guys, going into this one, I think it was a game that we previewed and talked about, that these two teams are kind of like the Spider-Man meme. They're just sitting there, pointing at each other, identical statistical profiles, built almost identically. And this was going to be a game that ultimately, if everything equaled, okay, that quarterback play was going to decide this thing, okay? And I don't think that quarterback play ultimately decided it, but I do think it played a very, very big role in this game. I mean, Dante Moore, 26 of 33, 234 yards. He did have one pick. Baron Morton, 18 of 32 for 137, 2 interceptions, and he also lost a fumble. That right there, I know stats don't tell the whole story, but you can just tell from that stat line that Dante Moore far outplayed Baron Morton in this game, and it was pretty evident watching this game as well. I thought that as this game got going, it was really quick and easy. It very quickly you saw the supremacy and just how good Texas Tech's up front is. David Bailey, 31. I don't know if there's a better defensive player in the country. The way that he played in this game, and like if you just looked at it and said, oh man, 23-0, Texas Tech got destroyed. Like I think 31 might have been the best player on the field for Texas Tech. He just, I mean, he couldn't be blocked. He made a ton of plays in this game. He affected the game. He affected Moore a good bit. One of the reasons that Oregon went only 4 of 19 on third down in this game, I thought he was amazing. So, I thought that this game, like I said, the way that it started, I thought Moore looked pretty confident from the get-go, and Morton did not. I thought it was pretty evident early on that his feet and his eyes were not matched up at all. I didn't think he trusted what he was seeing, and it showed. Like the first couple possessions, I had the ball, like just some quick game stuff. He was missing bad, because I really think he didn't trust what he was seeing, and he definitely didn't look like he was comfortable at all. I thought that Oregon, it was pretty evident they were going to do the Dan Lannon fourth down thing, and they were going to stick with it, and it went good for them some, and it went bad for them some. I thought it wasn't warranted every time. Believe it or not, in this day and age of football, where there's a lot of people out there that they'll call you a dummy if you don't think it's a good idea to go for it on fourth down, or they'll call you a dummy if you say, I'll take 3 points all day long if we can get some points instead of trying for 7. But believe it or not, 3 plus 3 plus 3, right? That equals 9, and plus 3 more equals 12, and plus 3 more equals 15. You can accumulate points in a football game by kicking field goals and taking 3. I thought there, when Oregon's up 6-0 and they're down there, like, take the points. It's already pretty obvious at that point in time that your defense is playing lights out, and Texas Tech's really going to struggle. Like, 9 points is better than 6. I thought at one point there in the third quarter when it's sitting there, I can't remember if it was still 6-0 or if it was 13 at that point in time, but Oregon's around midfield. They go for it, don't get it. Like, it's really evident that they're not going to be able to – Texas Tech's not going to be able to get down the field, right? It don't matter how much oil money they have. They cannot buy their way to a drive in this game. And, like, I think in those instances, I think Dan Lannon probably needs to look at, I understand that he has great confidence in this team. I love his aggression and going for it on fourth down. But I do believe you kind of have to look at the specific scenario. I know they got the analytics book and all that tells them what they need to do. But also I think you got to open your eyes as a coach and say, hey, they're not going to score. If we punt them and the ball goes in the end zone and they got to get it out to the 20, they're not going 80 yards on our defense today. And so, I think that's about my only criticism of Dan Lannon. In this instance, obviously he did a great job turning this thing around from the JMU game, using the 34 points that James Madison scored in all the garbage time to motivate his guys. Like, that you could tell they were ready for this challenge. And he's just one of those dudes, man. Like, he's a ball coach and he knows how to motivate better than just about anybody. He comes from that Kirby Smart school of motivation, and he had his guys ready, and a lot of credit to him for having Oregon ready. I thought, like I said, for Texas Tech, 31-9-2 on defense, man, they kind of neutralized Moore's poise and Moore's smoothness back there in this game. I really thought Moore was confident. He knew where to go with the ball, but that Texas Tech pass rush, they neutralized his ability and his confidence and what he was doing for the Oregon offense by getting pressure, batting balls down and getting sacks, and they were kind of stopping Oregon from being able to sustain drives that might turn into points. And, I thought they really did a great job. And I thought it was pretty evident after the first quarter that the recipe that Texas Tech had used all year was not going to work in this game. That Oregon had run 25 plays in the first quarter and Texas Tech ran 7. All year, Texas Tech racked up play counts and snap counts on offense, and they just could not sustain drives in this game. And ultimately, that's what lost them the game. Captain Obvious right here, right, Joey? That they couldn't move the ball, they couldn't sustain drives, they got shut out. That's why they didn't win the game. But what I mean by that is ultimately it hurt their defense in the long run, because defensively, like, they just couldn't get off the field. I'm sorry. Defensively, they were really, really good early, and then offensively, they could not sustain drives, and they kept having to kick it back to Oregon, and the defense wore down eventually for Texas Tech. You look at Oregon's rushing numbers. 47 yards, or 64 yards on 47 carries, 1.4 yards per carry. We talked about in our preview that Oregon's MO is running the football. That Moore's a really good quarterback. They have playmakers. They like explosives, but their thing is running the football. And they had 64 yards rushing in this game against Texas Tech. I mean, that just goes to show you how good this Texas Tech defense is, especially up front. They just got worn down. I think, obviously the turnover battle hurt them a lot. Those 4 turnovers, just when you're struggling like that and you can't sustain drives, and then you're also giving it to them, turning it over, that's not a recipe for success. And I thought, like I said, I thought Morton, he looked in over his head a lot. That's one thing. We broke down the deep choice on the show the other night, the Texas Tech's staple passing concept, and that's just one of the things, like, it's always been a knock on deep choice teams in college football, is that you can have these explosives with this simple concept of, hey, we're gonna isolate defensive backs, put them on an island, and say, we're just gonna beat your leverage. If you play up on us, we're gonna run by you. If you play back on us, we're gonna curl up in front of you. And the thing that neutralizes it is having dudes, right? If you don't mind being on that island and you can cover, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the choice route does. It's going to be covered, and that's ultimately what we saw in this game. Oregon's secondary played out of their minds, and covered everything up. Texas Tech averaged 4.3 yards per attempt, not even half a first down per attempt, and they couldn't get any of those explosives out of the passing game that they've gotten all year, and then they just couldn't get the run game going either. The one long run that Jacoby Williams had there in the first half, Oregon has him wrapped up 2 times at the line of scrimmage, and then he spins around to the left and gets going, and he had 50 yards on that carry. You take away that carry, Texas Tech had 28 yards rushing for the game. They ended up with 78 even with that. So that it was, I kind of thought going into this thing that it was going to be tough for Texas. It was going to be tough for either team to run the football, because both teams were built on the defensive front. And we talked about that. And both defensive fronts showed up, and it's evident in the rushing production. And that's why I thought that quarterback play would be so big in this game. And Dante Moore passed with flying colors. Now, I thought Oregon played, they made plenty of mistakes. All the bad snaps in the first half, I thought Moore was bad. A couple of them were not bad snaps. I think he just dropped the ball. I don't know if he took his eye off of it, but they were putting themselves constantly behind the sticks. And there's not a great call for 3rd and 20 and 3rd and 15. And, they were helping Texas Tech's defense a little bit in that way. Well, I thought, once again, the 4th down calls were really good for the most part. And Oregon really made a living on those in this game to sustain drives and get points. And that was kind of the difference early, especially. Texas Tech just couldn't sustain any drive. I thought neither team, like I said, they really couldn't buy a run if they needed to. It was very tough going and running the football in this game for both teams. And, I wrote down at halftime that Moore was playing better than Morton by a lot. And, I thought that continued on to the second half and was a big factor in the outcome of this game ultimately. Turnovers just killed Texas Tech. I thought that special teams for Oregon were huge. They had a good punt return, or a couple good punt returns. And, I thought Texas Tech obviously missing field goals. Oregon made their field goals, and it helped them, win the game. They ultimately hit those 3 field goals that helped them pull away and get enough of a margin where they felt comfortable in putting this thing away. Kind of post-mortem on Texas Tech's season. Obviously, the project of the Matador Club and Cody Campbell spending in NIL, like it worked. I mean, Texas Tech football had their best season in their history. And it was built on the backs of a defense that, basically came through NIL, okay, and the transfer portal. And Texas Tech did a great job identifying the guys that they needed. Um, I think it was funny that, I mean, I love Jacob Rodriguez. He is a great player. I mean, he is such a good football player. Um, and everything I've ever watched on him is great. Uh, but he finished fifth in the Heisman Trophy voting, and if you look at it, like he's nowhere close to the best player in their defensive front, like nowhere close. I mean, David Bailey and Lee Hunter, Romello Height, those guys are, I mean, they're gonna make a bunch of money on Sundays. I mean, they're awesome, and Texas Tech being able to identify those guys, go after them in the portal, do what it takes to get them there. Um, that's what you have to do in today's age of college football, and it gave them a shot. It got them to this point, 3 wins away from a national championship, and you run into a team like Oregon that they're going to be tough to beat in any instance, and um, you know it Texas Tech didn't quite have enough in this one, but the project worked, and what Joey McGuire and those guys out there have built, it's sustainable. Now you got to go do it again. Um, you got to try to get some of these guys to stay, and you got to keep identifying people in the portal and be willing to do what it takes to get them there. But I mean, the blueprint's there. You just went 12-1, or I'm sorry, 12-2. You won the Big 12. You got to bye, and like I said, you're 3 wins away from hosting the national championship trophy, and that's you're in the show, right? You're in there, and I think it's sustainable to do this. Not some Cinderella season. I think Texas Tech will be back. Oregon, now I think they're a team that's dangerous in this thing. I don't know, I know there were some people out there that thought Oregon stood a great chance to win this whole thing, but I don't think a whole lot of people did. And, I'm really excited about this rematch in the semis with Oregon and Indiana, Mendoza and Moore, probably the two best quarterback prospects. It's going to be interesting to see this Moore. I think a lot of people think, hey, the common thought is he's coming back. It's really his first year as a starter in college. But hypothetically, they win these next 2 games, the bump he's going to get out of that, it's going to be really hard to pass up that draft, I think, if he takes his team on a run and continues to play the way he's playing right now. So that quarterback matchup is obviously going to be a big one in this one. And once again, I'm excited to break down the film of this game, like I said, especially from the Texas Tech defensive standpoint of those guys like Bailey and Hunter and Hott, Rodriguez, and how impressed I was with that defensive front coming away in a game that you lost by 23 points. But I do feel like those guys in that defense was really impressive all year. And for the people that didn't watch Texas Tech much this year and got a chance to watch them yesterday, I think you probably saw that. So we'll go ahead and move on to the Rose Bowl now. I said in our show on Sunday, in our preview show, that this was the one game out of these 4 that the statistical profiles of the two teams just didn't match up. I think, if you looked at Ohio State, Miami, or Oregon, Texas Tech, Georgia, Ole Miss, if you really looked at those teams, you saw the matchup. You saw the reasons they were there, the identities of those teams, and you saw that there's a potential for there to be a really good football game in all 3 of those matchups. Now, did we get really good football games in all 3? Not necessarily. I thought there was some really good, entertaining football in them. But the one game we thought that didn't kind of meet that standard was the Rose Bowl, because Indiana's statistical profile was that of an elite team, and Alabama's was nowhere near it. And I think we kind of pointed out on the preview show that kind of the one thing Alabama had going for it was that strength of schedule and that strength of record, right? Those wins in the middle of the season against Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Tennessee, like that was what they hung their hat on. And we ask, would that kind of battle testedness play out in this type of game? Or Indiana did not have the same strength of record. I think they were in the low 20s, or I'm sorry, the high 20s, where Alabama's strength of record in a couple different metrics were like second and sixth. Um, that was kind of the one thing Alabama had going for it, going in. Turns out Indiana's strength of schedule, strength of record, they can only blow out people by so much, because Alabama suffered the same fate as Illinois and Purdue, um, and so many others that Indiana just made quick work of and took care of in almost machine like fashion this year. Um, I think that early on in this game, Alabama's pressure package on that first series, they got a couple sacks. They kind of confused Mendoza. Kind of set up in my seat like, hey, plenty of people had come out this week and thought, hey, Alabama, they're going to come out of nowhere and they're going to, win this football game. They're going to show Indiana like, hey, this is real blue blood college football right here. And that first series kind of made me kind of, set up a little bit. But I think it became pretty evident on Indiana's that second drive was so machine like 97 yards after Alabama pinned them deep. Um, Run first, high percentage throws from Mendoza, receivers making plays, 80, 13, 3. That receiving core is, they are so good. 80 and 13, they're just so long and rangy, 6'4", 6'5" type guys. Like Mendoza's really good at when they're covered, they're just not covered because he knows how to put it away from the defender and give them a chance, and they make plays. And Cooper, number 3, like he's the prototypical slot. Like he's really slick in there, especially inside running those crossers, and he's hard to cover. And so they got those high percentage throws going, and they were really. And I just thought Mendoza from that point on, like it's scary how robotic he is in his poise. Like you can tell just watching his pre-snap stuff with his eyes, and then post-snap, he's just he's so cool. He's so poised. He knows where everybody's going to be. He knows where the ball's going to go, and uh, Alabama just didn't have anything for him after that first series where they sacked him a couple times, and um, that was just super impressive to me. And if people that haven't watched Indiana a lot this year, I think that second drive was kind of the statement drive of okay, like this is not going to be any different. This is not going to be any different from Maryland or any of those games that Indiana just walked the dog all year long because and there's nothing. That's what it's kind of crazy. There's nothing fancy. There's nothing glitzy or glamorous about what they're doing offensively. I mean, they are they're a run first team, right? I mean, they are going to run the football, and I mean, you look in this game. I mean, they ran it 50 times for 215 yards. Like they, for lack of a better phrase, they Alabama. I mean, the stat line of this game for Indiana reads like a 2015 Alabama college football playoff game where you throw it 16 times for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns, and you run it 50 times for 215 yards. Like that to me, that just reads like an Alabama stat line from 10 years ago. Uh, and that's honestly how this team is built. You know, those backs are really good. Offensive line, obviously, the Rose Bowl named, uh, you know, the offensive line really the MVPs of the game for Indiana. And I mean, they kept Mendoza clean. I mean, they imposed their will. And, I thought that it became really evident early that Alabama did not have a plan that involved a run game. Like, I think they knew they couldn't run it against that Indiana front, and they weren't even really going to try. Um, Ty Simpson was Alabama's leading rusher in this football game with 17 yards, and he didn't play a snap in the second half. He got pulled after he fumbled on that last possession of the first half. When he got hit in the back, he just couldn't go back out there in the second half. And but that just goes to show you that they just didn't have a plan that involved a running game. And um, I really thought that uh, that Indiana, it was like I said, it was just machine like. And I thought that the last drive of the first half, after Simpson's fumble, it was just a death march. I mean, so prototypical, run first, some high percentage throws on second and medium, on first down, high percentage throws mixed in there, getting those guys involved. They hit the crosser for the touchdown uh, to Cooper, I believe, on that one, and like they just put that was the dagger. I mean, it was 17-0, but it might as well have been 57-0 because um, Alabama showed no fight in the second half at all. Um, and to that point, uh, speaking of making, Indiana sort of looking like these vintage Alabama teams in this game, uh, they imposed their will to the point Alabama looked like they quit. They really looked like that they wanted no more, no moss, nothing. Like they didn't want any part of Indiana in that second half, and it showed because Indiana just from the point that Alabama kicked the field goal and made it 24-3. I mean, even on that drive before that where Indiana scored, like after that, it was just they just ran the football right at them, and there was no resistance at all. And I Kalen DeBoer's a really good football coach. He's proven it everywhere he's been. I mean, and he's proven it in instances at Alabama, but something is wrong at Alabama. And it's not like I said. I don't think it's Kalen DeBoer. I think culturally, what it could be is they're still in this sort of shadow period of moving on from Nick Saban to the point that there are players still in that program that were recruited there by Nick Saban. And those players are trying to mix in with this new culture. And, I think it might be to the point where it's just not working. And something is off culturally at Alabama right now because they just didn't look from game 1 to game 15. There were very few times in the season where they just looked like they had an identity, like they had no identity. And this game today was the perfect example of that. Their identity was let Ty Simpson try to drop back and get hot, and if he gets hot, we'll play the hot hand and throw it to Bernard and Horton and maybe mix in Ryan Williams if I can get him off the milk carton where he's missing. And like that was it. I mean, their defense, they were pretty stout this year, but in this game they showed no resistance. And I just think something is off there. And like I said, it may be to the point where I don't think it's like a Kalen DeBoer problem. I think it doesn't matter who it was problem that replaced Saban. That until all those guys are out of there that he recruited, no one's ever going to really be able to establish their own culture and kind of their own uh, perception of what this program is. And with that being the case, it's just off, and there's no real identity. And I think Alabama better get in that portal. They should already be in there hard today, um, especially on the offensive line. The offensive line was a problem all year long for them, and primary reason why they couldn't run it. And primary reason why, Ty Simpson was banged up coming into this game before he got hurt on the scramble today where he fumbled. Um, I think they really need to look hard in the portal for those guys. And um, you know, I know everybody in the state of Alabama that wears crimps, and they want to fire everybody today in the Alabama program. But um, I think kind of the measured approach and the reasonable approach is, yeah, I mean, Kellen DeBoer still, I mean, he still needs time to get this thing going in his own vision and in his own identity. And that's one thing I think he needs to work, they need to work hard on going into 26 is what is their identity? Because Alabama football just, they don't have one right now. They're still plenty talented. They're still in the mix. They won a college football playoff game this year, but they're not. Something is off there. Um, Indiana is just a tank, man. They are the real deal. And anybody that doubted that before today, I think you see why they're the favorite to win the national championship. And it's kind of crazy to kind of say, but I think all four of these teams can win the national championship. But I think Indiana is the head and shoulders favorite. I think they're physical. I think let's start with their defense. I think they're physical up front. They freaking reset the line of scrimmage. They're heavy handed on the D line. Those linebackers, um, I mean, they fly to the ball and hit people so violently. They don't fall back when they tackle. They don't sling people when they tackle. Like they run through you. And the secondary, those corners, man, I mean, they play so physical and so disciplined back there. It's the second game in a row that you're playing. You play Ohio State with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, and then you play Alabama with Bernard and Williams and Horton, um, and Lazier Brooks, and like they, it doesn't matter. Like they don't give up. I mean, they combined to give up 13 points to Alabama and Ohio State in those two games. Like their secondary is locked down. And then offensively, man, they're so physical up front. They play together up front. They impose their will, and like that's why. The Mendoza's the Heisman winner for a reason, but they're run first team, man. Like they're gonna run it into your face and make you stop it before they do anything else. And I think that's kind of Signetti's. That's his identity as a coach. Mendoza's probably top pick in the draft next year, man. Like he's really good. Uh, I think his feet's great. He's always in control. Like I don't think there's any point in time I've watched him this year where he took the snap of the ball where he was in complete control, knew what was happening, and knew where the ball was supposed to go, um, and what he needed to do to execute the play. Like I mean, you saw it after the game. They stick a microphone in his face, and he's breaking down Oregon's defense already. Like, I mean, he knows this game so well and personnel so well for Alabama. He's already talking about Oregon's personnel. I mean, he's really, really slick. I think uh, I don't think he's as polished as Dante Moore. Dante Moore is so smooth when he throws the football. It's effortless. And I think he's a little bit more rigidy uh, in terms of his delivery and stuff like that. But he's really accurate. He's like I said, his feet are good. Like he can hurt you on the ground. He's not Tim Tebow or anything, but like he can run the football and hold his own when he needs to. And his scrambles, they get him out of a lot of stuff. So, and I think the receivers, man, like I said earlier, 80, 13, 3, like they're they're hard to cover. Like they're really hard to cover. And I think their their backs, people talk a lot about um, you know, they talk a lot about the backs that like Jeremiah Love and um, I think last year, you know, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Junkins, people like those are the backs that have been highlighted really a lot in the last couple of years. Genty at Boise State, But like if you look at Black and Hemby, like the backs for Indiana, man, they are so freaking good, and they hit the hole and they get downhill, they get vertical. Their receivers get vertical. Like I think if you, I mean, and this is going to be something too when we kind of break the film down of this game next week, that the receivers for Indiana, like when they catch the football, they drop step and they get vertical. They're trying to get a first down. They're trying to score a touchdown. Like what I mean by drop step is like literally catch the ball like you do in basketball and drop step to go up to shoot. Like that's what they do. They drop step and get vertical. Their backs, man, they hit everything downhill. And there's not a lot of side to side. There's not a lot of east and west. There's a lot of north and south in that. And so I think Indiana is the full package, man. And uh, words can't really describe what Kurt Signetti has done there in 2 years. The ability to come in and build this staff, identify the people that you want to bring in through the portal, the guys that he wanted to bring with them from James Madison, and then the guys they've brought in through the portal from elsewhere. Like they've identified some major talent, man. And like you look at their blue chip ratio, like I mean, they're behind some pretty low teams in college football. Like Boston College's blue chip ratio is higher than Indiana's. Now it's just amazing what they've done. They're so disciplined and well coached, and the killer instinct that they have, man. Like they step on people's throats and they freaking mash the gas and run away from you. Like they leave no doubt, and that's something that like in this day and age, I mentioned it earlier in talking about, you know, like Georgia and Ole Miss and being in the game and being to this point and winning these coin flip games. Like Indiana makes, I mean, none of their games are coin flip games, not even their playoff games. Like they're just destroying people. And you know, I mean, they beat Oregon by double digits at Autzen in October, and I'm super interested in that football game for a lot of reasons. But if Indiana plays like this, I think they'll handle Oregon. Now, I think Oregon is obviously they're talented, and you know they have the hot hand at quarterback right now, and they're very well coached. But we all know the old moniker: it's hard to beat the same team twice. But it's hard to look at Indiana and not think that they're going to win the national championship, barring some type of off character performance by them, or some just otherworldly performance by one of these other three teams that are left. So, you know, that's something that uh, it's kind of crazy to say that in this day and age that the second losingest program in terms of winning percentage in FBS is, you know, they're the head and shoulders favorite to win the national championship with 2 games left. So I mean it's just crazy to think about. Uh so the guys, you know, obviously of all those games early next week on our shows, we're gonna have film breakdowns and kind of show you the ins and outs of what worked for teams and what didn't, and kind of some of the you know the X and O schematic stuff that won these football games and also lost them. And you know, we're really looking forward to sharing that with you and look for those to come out. Probably starting on Monday, we'll be getting those out to you. So, and before we go tonight, like I mentioned earlier, kind of want to mention the transfer portal goings on as the portal officially opened at midnight today. And so, you know, a couple of big names: Sam Levitt from Arizona State. You know, Pete Nakos at On3 has reported that Kentucky is the top school to land Levitt right now. It's nothing's done deal. They're working to get him on campus, and try to get that visit locked down. But that's very interesting. Will Stein, you know, it's not taking his hire long at Kentucky to kind of raise some eyebrows. And you know, Kentucky's one of those places, man. It's like, I mean, if you look at what Indiana's doing right now, What Ole Miss is doing right now, why not Kentucky, right? I mean, Mark Stoops has had them in double-digit wins pretty recently, and if you open up that NIL bag and get some key transfers in, especially somebody like a Sam Levitt, you're probably doing pretty good. Couple other names that are kind of making some noise there in the portal. Austin Simmons, who was the starter at Ole Miss, start the year. Obviously the Trinidad Shamlin show now is taking over, but Simmons is going to stay with Ole Miss throughout the playoff, and it sounds like Missouri is the top school that he's looking at, and so Missouri looking to go in the portal second year in a row after they got Bo Pabula last year. So he's a guy too. He kind of got Wally pipped a little bit in terms of, he got hurt and just he never could get his job back after that. And it seemed like, he come in a little bit. He was used some in some situational, like two quarterback stuff. Even after Shamlis kind of took over, but he really, he was the guy before Shamlis for sure, and interesting to see what he'll do at Missouri. And then Brandon Sorsby, quarterback at Cincinnati. Sounds like there's several places that he's going to try to, or that are going to try to get him in for a visit, but LSU is probably the most notable place. And it's interesting that Pete Nakos at On3 is reporting as well that Brendan Sorsby is going to demand anywhere in the area of $5 million a year in terms of NIL. So that shows you the kind of game that we're involved in right now in college football and what these transfers are worth, and the quarterback market especially. And it's going to be really interesting to see going forward who lands these top portal classes. It's going to be interesting to see too with this new window, right? This winter only window, for it being open here a couple weeks, and how these visits get lined up, and how these teams are going to try to build and use the portal to kind of supplement what they already have, and try to hold their build their rosters to a point where they're college football playoff level. So guys, that's all we got for tonight. I appreciate you being with us. Like I said, we'll leave you with the reminder to subscribe and like our show, and to subscribe on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, to follow us on Joey Browning CFB at Twitter. Follow us on Joey Browning CFB at TikTok. And guys, leave your comments here in the video. DM us on one of our social media platforms. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear from it's any ideas or any requests you have in terms of film breakdown. And like I said, we'll see you guys on Monday. We'll have some film breakdowns of these quarterfinal games and get into some X's and O's. And until then, guys, Happy New Year once again, and y'all have a great weekend, and we'll see you early next week.